In this tutorial, we will go through the entire process of completing a simple Hello World assignment using GitHub via the command line. So the first thing we'll do is create a new assignment repository. Then we'll create a copy of that repository on our local computer by cloning it. We'll import the project into Eclipse, edit our code, create some test cases. Then we'll make sure that all of our new and edited files are added to GitHub and our changes are committed. Then we'll verify in Travis CI that all of the test cases are still passing. So the first step of this is to go to the assignment description. So the instructor will provide you with a description of the assignment that will have the name of the assignment, its due date, any information that you need in order to be able to complete the assignment. And partway down the page, you'll see a list of submission requirements. And in those submission requirements, you'll find a link to allow you to create your own private GitHub repository for the assignment. So if I click that link, it'll ask me to accept the assignment. Notice that I'm logged into GitHub as myself. And once I accept the assignment, it will create a new repository specifically for me that will be titled with the name of the assignment followed by my username. So each individual student will have his or her own repository. So once I accept the assignment, it takes a minute for GitHub to get everything ready to go, and then it tells me that my assignment has been created. If it's still preparing the repository, then I'll see a page that looks like this, and if I simply delete the import part and refresh, eventually it will show me the repository that it has created for the assignment. Okay, so now I have a repository that contains the assignment description, which is the thing that we were just looking at, a bunch of configuration files that we'll talk a little bit about, and then any skeleton source code and test cases that are required for this particular project. So most of these configuration files should never be changed. You can look at them, but you should never actually modify them. So the pom.xml and the travis.yml files are the two files that are required for Travis to be able to build your project automatically every time you commit it to GitHub. So we'll look at this toward the end, but every single time you make changes to your code, Travis will rebuild your project and will indicate whether the test cases are all still passing. The rest of these files, most of them have to do with Eclipse, and they will allow you to be able to easily import this project into Eclipse once you clone it locally. The most important element of the repository is the source directory, and inside of the source directory you will see a main directory and a test directory. So inside of the test directory is where all of the test cases will reside. So for most projects and assignments, you will have many different test cases. In this case, there's only one simple test case. And if you take a look at it, you can see that it just tests this method say hello. And the test cases should never be changed. So no code in this test directory should ever be changed by you. If you change that code so that you are passing the test cases, it's very likely that you will not receive full credit for the assignment. So you should never, ever, ever change the code that's in this test directory. In the main directory will be the code that you actually do need to change in order to complete the assignment. So if we look just at this one simple example, we have a class and we have the skeleton of a method and a note that specifies that we're supposed to replace the body of this method with our solution. So you'll notice that the Java documentation above the method describes pretty clearly what the method is supposed to do. So our goal is simply to replace this code with code that does this, and hopefully then we should be passing the test cases. You are always free to add additional methods and additional classes, and we will look at an example of an additional class that we might want to add here. But you're welcome to add additional code, but you may not delete any of the code that is provided for you. If you do, you won't be passing the test cases. So once you have completed the creation of the repository, the instructor will be able to see that repository here in Travis CI. So again, This is something we'll revisit toward the end of the tutorial as I show you what happens when you actually commit your changes. And please note that what we're doing right now is something the instructor has to do, but I want to show you what actually happens behind the scenes once you create your repository. So I will be able to see your repository in this list and specify that every time you commit code to your repository, I want Travis to automatically build your code and run all of the test cases. So by turning this on, that's what I enable. And we'll again revisit that at the end of the tutorial. Okay, so now we have our repository and we have enabled Travis so that every time we commit, we will actually be able to rebuild and run all of the test cases. So the next step is that we want to create a copy of this repository on our local computer. So right now, all of that only exists on GitHub. So the way that we're going to do that in this tutorial is using the GitHub command line tools. So I'm going to open up my terminal window, and first of all, I have installed Git. So if I type Git, I see a bunch of stuff. If you have not correctly installed Git, when you type Git, it'll say, I don't know what this program is. So I have created a directory CS514 where I'll store the work for this class, and inside of that directory I will make another directory called samples just to make things a little bit cleaner. So if I change into that directory, there's currently nothing there. So what I want to do is I want to first do a clone. So I'm going to type git clone, and I have to provide the URL of this repository. So I do not want to provide this URL. So that's very important, is you don't just copy and paste the URL from here. What you want to do is select clone or download, and then if you click this little thing right here, it'll copy it to your clipboard, and you can just simply paste it here. So once I have cloned the repository, you'll notice that now I have a directory that contains all of the same stuff that we configuration stuff, etc., is now copied to my local computer. So the next step is that I actually want to import all of this into Eclipse. So I'm going to launch Eclipse, and I'm going to select that I want my workspace to be that top-level samples directory that we were just looking at. So it takes Eclipse a minute to get everything set up. And usually I will initially see this screen, but if you click Workbench, that will take you to the main Java browser, and this is where you will do most of your work. So notice I don't have any projects over here, and that's because what I need to do is right-click and select Import, and I'm going to select General Existing Projects into Workspace. Next. And it'll ask me to select a root directory. So I can browse for the appropriate directory, and I was in srollins CS515 samples. It's very important that you make sure to select the correct directory, and this was the directory that we were just looking at. That's the directory that was just created. So if I type pwd again, users srollins 515 samples, sample1 say hello srollins, is a very long name, and that's where we are here. So if I open that up, finish. Now my project should appear over here on the left. And it takes a minute for it to build correctly. All of those errors that you just saw have now gone away. And you'll notice this is, again, all of the same structure that we were looking at. So there are sort of two important pieces here. You have your test cases, and again, these test cases you do not want to modify. You can look at them, but you don't want to modify them. And then you have your source code. So here is our source code. So this is the code that we actually need to complete, and the assignment is telling me that this method should return the string hello. So I'm going to delete all of the code that was there that was telling me this is what I needed to do, and I am going to return the string hello. So I might do something like that. Fantastic. Now I have a couple of options in terms of how I test this. So I'm because I'm using Eclipse, it's continuously compiling my program, so I see that I don't have any compiler errors. But I want to actually test this and make sure it's doing the right thing before I check it into GitHub. So the first thing that I might want to do is create a new class. I'm just going to call it driver, and I'm going to give it a main method. And inside of that class, I'm going to test the code that I just wrote. So I'm going to create a new object of type hello world. And I am going to use the correct syntax. And I'm simply going to print out the result of calling that say hello method that we just implemented. Okay. So I create an instance of the object, I call say hello, and I'm expecting that that should return to me the string hello. So when I execute this driver, I should see hello, and if I run this program, that's what I see. So that's what I expected to see. Hopefully that's the correct thing. So the next step, now that I have written my own test case and I'm pretty convinced that it works correctly, my next step is to run the test cases that were provided as part of the assignment. And there are a couple of ways that I can do that. So if I select here and I right click, I can select that I want to run as JUnit test. And if I do that, it should run all of the unit tests that were specified in this test directory. And you'll notice that it looks like there's a problem. So before we diagnose that problem further, let's take a look at the other way that we could actually run our test cases, which is that we could select run as Maven test. So remember we had this POM XML file, and that told us how to build and run the test cases for the program. And that's what Travis is going to use. And so part of the reason that I show you this option is because once you check into GitHub, if you go to Travis, this is essentially what you'll see is output that looks something like this. And consistent with our JUnit test, it's telling us that we have a failure. So if we look here, or if we look here, we see some output that gives us a hint as to what the problem is, and the problem seems to be that I overlooked the fact that I was supposed to have an exclamation point at the end of the word hello. So it says incorrect return value for say hello. It expected hello exclamation point, but it was hello without an exclamation point. So we make that change, and we can run our driver again, and now we see what we expect based upon the change. And then we can either run our JUnit tests, in which case we see something like this. So nice green check marks, that's always what we want to see, 0 failures. And if we run the Maven test, we should see, same thing, no failures. So fantastic, very exciting. It looks like we have correctly completed this assignment, but we're not done yet. Okay, so if we go look at the repository, right, if we do a reload of this repository, we look in our source directory, we look at our hello world, we do a reload of that, it's still the old one, okay, because the changes we were making were to our local copy of this particular project. So in order to be able to submit our code, we need to add all of our new files and edited files, and then commit our changes. And that's a multi-step process, so we're going to look at how that happens. So the first thing that we're going to do, and let's make sure we're in the right directory, it looks like we are going to type git add dot. So that should add all of the files that have been changed in this directory. So anything in this top level directory down that has been changed or added should get staged for commit when we say that we want to add dot. Now if we type get status, this is just to sort of check on things. We can see that it says, hey, you had a new file driver.java and that you modified the file hello world.java. So that's exactly what we want to see because those were the 2 changes that we made. Okay, so now after we have done the add, we're going to type git commit -m, and we're going to provide a message. Okay, so the first thing that's important is the get add, now the get commit. So get commit, and then we do -m and specify some message that tells us what changes we made in this particular commit. So if you were working on a project and you hadn't completed all of the pieces of it, you could say, okay, methods 1 and 2 are working, method 3 is still failing in this way. In this case, we've completed the entire assignment, so we could say hello, working correctly, or something like this. Okay, and we'll see something that looks a little bit like this. Now, we're still not done. Again, if we go over here, we still see the old version on GitHub. So we add, we commit, and then we specify that we want to push to the origin master. So not until we do the push does our code actually get sent up to the GitHub server. Okay, so it's very, very important that you complete all of those steps. Add, commit, and then push. Because until you do the push, we can't see your solution. So the TAs and I cannot see your solution. We will not be able to grade your solution until you do that push. Now, once I've done the push, if I look here, I see that the code is actually there. And so hopefully this is going to work correctly. And if I look here, I actually see my driver class as well. Okay. So as a final step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this repository. So if you log into travisci.com/profile, you should be able to see all of your repositories. And this is exactly what we want to see. So you'll be able to see all of your repositories if you click on the appropriate repository. What you will see is that hopefully you will see this green check mark that it says that it's working correctly. Okay, so again, this is part of the reason that we looked at how to run the Maven test cases is because this output looks exactly the same, right? And it's telling us that the build was successful. Now it's possible that I could have, let's suppose that I was working on my code and I had not fixed this bug that we had seen previously before I actually decided to check in my code. So I went back to this old version. So let's go back to the command line. Again, we have to do add, commit, and push. Okay, so this checked in this old non-working version. And again, if we go back and we run that non-working version, it should tell us that our test cases are failing. So this is now the version that we have checked into GitHub. And if we go back to Travis, you'll see in this case, it's yellow at the moment. And yellow means that it's still in the process of actually running the test cases. So it doesn't happen immediately, especially for larger programs. So in this case, we checked in. Travis is running our test cases. Lots of stuff going on. Building. And failures 1. Okay, so when we see that there's a build failure, and this is what it'll look like if there's a failure. Okay, it'll tell me that this particular test case failed. So if I check in my code, I go to my Travis profile, I look here, and I see that it's failing. Of course, that means that I have more work to do. So just to make sure that we don't leave this unfinished, I am going to go back to the working version, run the test cases, make sure that they're passing locally, fantastic. And then again, we have 3 things we have to do. Add, commit, and push. Go back to Travis. It's still waiting to get the newest version. Again, if we look at our GitHub repository, look at our hello world, you'll notice that message that I just typed in, that's what appears here, right? So that's helpful in terms of knowing which version of the code this actually is. It looks like this is the right code. We go back and look at Travis. It's finally seen that we pushed a new version to GitHub. It's running this version of the code. And hopefully we will see that. And still building. Success. Hooray. So we have our green check mark. Fantastic. We can be pretty confident that we're going to get all of the points for the functionality part of this particular assignment.